Okay, so today we are going to be looking at Python lists. We have talked about lists before. Or let me change all these things to comments. So we'll follow these subtopics that are outlined to understand lists today. So when we talk about Python lists, just look at it like a container that stores data, stores information. So it's like a data structure in Python. So again, when you talk about like an array, it can store an array for you in Python. So when you want to create lists in Python, the first thing you have to know is square brackets like this. So if you want to create a list, let me call this L, and I can say equal to square brackets. And then it can contain any number of elements. It can contain a, maybe that's a string, comma, you have another element B. So the elements are separated by commas. Then you have another element C. Okay, so like this now, this is a list. It contains 3 items, A, B, and C.
Please, can the person mute his mic or is this
So this is how Python list is. It's a data structure that stores items for us. Now, you notice that most of our codes, we've not really been storing items in any container so far. We just run the code and possibly just print out what you want to see. But with list now, you can begin to store them. It's like a container, you can keep things in them one after the other. Okay. You can also have an empty list. And for an empty list, I can say just like this. When you just see only the square brackets, nothing in it, is an empty list. And this empty list is equivalent to false. The Boolean of an empty list is false. It's just like also 0. 0 is false too. It's also like an empty string, just like that. They kind of share some identity. They are all just empty, empty, empty. And anything that is empty in Boolean will be false. Once it contains something, now it will be true. So if you check the Boolean of an empty string, it's going to be false. But if the string contains any element, even though it's space, it will no longer be false, to be true. Okay, so this is list and an empty list. Now, a list can contain different data types. The list I just created now is containing only string. But list is not limited to string. It can contain all data types like this. So this is another list, and I'm going to put a string. I'll put an integer. I'll put a float. It can also contain another list. It can also contain another list, right? So this list now has 1, 2, 3, 4 elements. The first one is a string. The second one is an integer. The third one is a float. The fourth one is another list. So it can contain another list. and it can contain other data types which we've not also talked about. You can pretty much store any object in your list in Python. Okay. Now I just remember something again. In creation of a list, you can create a list by just like this line or just an empty list. And then you could also do something like this. Let's say S equals to list, and you open a bracket and put an iterable. And this one now, when you want to use this method to create a list, whatever you're passing into this place has to be an iterable. Do we remember what an iterable is?
Yes.
Yeah, we talked about it last class. Apart from Nkechi, any other person?
I don't know what it is, so.
Like, I don't know. Please explain. Oh.
Okay.
I've been seeing it, but I don't know what.
Thank you, my brother. God bless you.
Hearing it, non-eatable,
All right.
mutable, and non-mutable. No, when you talk about those
You
things,
can't change it, it's mutable. Each
yes,
table we
mutable,
can
you
get
can't change it.
the characters.
Okay. So we'll go that iterable now. When we say something is an iterable, you can iterate over it. You can go through it item by item,
Item.
right?
Yes.
Like when we talked about string in the other class, one thing that we meant to understand about string is an iterable. And what does that mean? If I put this string as string, you can move from S to T to R to I, N, and G one by one. You can go over them. The same thing with list like this. You can go from the first element to the second element to the third element. You can iterate. Iterate is like to go over, like for loop. How you go over something a number of times. You're iterating over it. Right? So in iteration, just like in maths, to your solving, you're trying to get a solution. You solve the first time, solve the second time, solve the third time. That looping is like iteration. I don't know if I'm explaining it clearly, but let me just try to throw another line. And we said something about string in the last class, that strings, they have index. Okay. So string, the first item is index 0. The second item is index 1. The third is index 2, and so on and so forth. Because in computer, we start counting from 0. Even if normally we will be saying everything will count from 1. But majorly in computer, we count from 0. So the first element is 0, and then the next one is 1. So because it's an iterable, you can index the list, the string from item 0, 1, and so on and so forth. So if I do this for I in, let me put this one. For I in this A-I-O-U is a string, okay? Now, because it's an iterable, I can do this, like I say print I. I'm going to iterate over it, which means I'll take the first, you know how for loop does? It like goes through a range. But when you put it this way with the string, we are now going to go through the first element, which is A, and I'll print A. I'll go through the second element. Let me now run this code. This is day 7. So you see, as I run it, in line 13, I was printing A, E, I, O, U, one after the other. Why I'm able to do this to this string is because it's an iterable. I'm iterating over it. When the for loop goes through it the first time, it picks the first element, A. The second time, the second element, E. Because it's an iterable, you can iterate over it. You can go through it one item after the other. That's when I say something is an iterable. Okay. Like if I put a number, even if I put like this, 111, no, this is a string. If I remove it, this is number now. When I remove the quotation mark,
Quotation.
it becomes a number. You cannot iterate over this and be saying for I in 111. No. You can't iterate over an integer because it's not an iterable. Even though it has 3 digits, you can't go over it 3 times because it's not iterable. It's part of its property being an integer. An integer is not iterable. But the string is an iterable. You can iterate over the string. So you can go through the items one after the other. And today we are dealing with list. The list also is iterable. You can go through the items of a list, A, B, and C. Is it clear?
Yes.
Benjamin,
Hey, yeah.
Yes,
Henry,
that's
Yeah.
it's the
don't worry.
mathematics.
Yeah. Now, if you want to declare a list in this format using this list, and then you put something in the bracket, I was saying that thing must be an iterable, which means whatever you're going to put in this bracket here must be something that is an iterable. You can iterate over it for it to form a list, because this line using list, we take this string and split it into a list. So I'm going to print out what S is, so we'll see how it's going to look. Save it. Then we'll run. See, now when we print it, can you see what it did here? See how it made,
Yes.
it took string. It was a string now, yeah? But it split it into forming a list. How do you know it's a list? You can see it has the square bracket. And then each of the items in the string, it put them as different items in the list. S, T, arrow, I, N, G. So it split it. The only way it can achieve this is because this is an iterable. If this was not an iterable, let me change it now and put a number. Let's say I put 222 and ask it to convert 222 to a list. You will see it will not be able to do it. It's a type error. INT, because it discovered that 222 is an integer. Integer object is not iterable. So because it's not iterable, this one cannot work with it. So this only works with an iterable. When you want to split it into a list, you can just put it like this. So with this, you can actually just take a string, split it, and get a list.
Okay, sorry. So from this explanation now, it's only strings that are iterable, not integers in a list.
And list.
Yeah, at least we've learned about strings, yes, correct. And we've now learned about lists as iterables. They are not the only two that are iterable. We are going to meet other ones. Okay.
Oh, no.
We are going to
I
meet
mean, for
other
the
ones.
integer, for the data types.
So, okay,
like
now there are
strings.
like primary data types where we talk about float, integer, string, boolean.
Mm.
Of these primary ones, it's only string that is an iterable.
Okay.
Okay, so now
And so
when you go further to list data type, is also an iterable. But it's not a primary data type, it's more like a secondary data type. So you can see it contains other data types. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
so the integer, float, they are not iterables, but string is an iterable. So don't think too much about all the iterables. Just let's take them one by one. We've encountered string. We know it's an iterable. Leave it like that. Today we are encountering list. We know it's an iterable. Leave it like that. When we encounter others, you would also know that they are there. So you don't just kill yourself now and say, okay, let me know all the iterables. No. As you work with them, you understand them just like that. Okay. So for now, the only iterables we have now dealt with is list and string. Okay, so for you to pass with this method, you have to put an iterable. and then it will split it into a list. Now we've talked about empty list, and we've also now said that list can contain different data types. You can have string, you can have integer,
Float.
float, also a list. So you can have list of a list. You get list of a list. All this now kind of comes into usefulness when you're trying to deal with matrix in maths. You know, someone say 3x3 matrix. So you can have it written as list of a list. List of another list. So you can have lists that contain even as many deep lists as possible. You can get so deep. So this one now can contain this list. Let's say in this list now, we have another list of item I, comma, and T. You see, okay, this should be string I. And you can also put variables in your list. Variables. So if I said something like name equals to James, I can put name also as an element in the list. You get. So name is a variable. It can also be in the list. Now this list is looking a little bit more complex, but let's break it down. You have first list. The third item in this list is another list. Now inside of this list, there is still another list as the second item. The first item is A, the second item is a list. So it can go on and on. This I now, I can change it to another list and another list and another list. It just look like many lists, but if you take time and look at it, you understand it. Now, we'll move to similarities to string. Oh, what's this now? Similarities to string, because we talked about string in the last class. There are certain things that list and string have in common, and there are some things that they don't also have in common. Sometimes it might seem as though it's a little bit confusing, but don't be confused. That's why we want to look at it so that we understand. String is a data type on its own. List also is on its own. The key thing is you will see the square bracket for the list, and you will see quotation for your string. Now, we talk about joining and repetition. So in string, we join two string concatenation with plus. The same thing with list. So if I have list 1 is equal to list 1 being equal to A, B, and C. And I have list 2 is equal to 1, 2, and 3. I can have list 3 to be equal to list 1 plus list 2. And this would give us like we are just adding both lists together. So we can also print it to see. So let's print list 3. Hope that's the only print. Okay, that's the only print so far. So I clear my screen. And then, okay, this is still there. Where is it? Oh, I need to save the file. Still having that. So you now see when I did the two lists and added them together, you can see A, B, C, comma, 1, 2, 3. Okay. It's added them and made them one bigger list using plus. In the same vein, if you use multiplication, repetition, just like in string, when you do times 10, the string will become, 10 times longer. The same thing with a list. If you do times 10, let's
Excuse
just say,
me.
hello?
Excuse me.
Go ahead.
Please, in this list 1 and 2, if you have repetition in them, does it override? Maybe in list 1 now we have 1 there. Then in list 2 we have 2.
Okay, so
If
whether
we
it
are
can have, you're like asking whether a list can have multiple items that are of the same,
we have
like
say duplicate.
duplicate
Okay.
elements. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
list
Does
can
it?
have duplicates.
Okay. It does not override the
No, it
presence of
doesn't.
the other one. Oh, okay.
Mm-mm. You can have duplicates. You can have a list of all, maybe 10 items, all of them are 0. You can have a list of 10 items, all of them are A, no problem. But there is another data structure we'll look at that you cannot have that repetition.
Duplicate copies. Okay.
Duplicate, and let me use the word duplicate, not repetition. You can't have duplicates. There's a type of that set. We'll get to a set. Now you can't have two elements that are the same. All the elements must be unique.
Okay.
We'll talk about it. Yeah, and that's a good question. So you can have A and another A, and maybe if I did list 1 plus list 1, maybe let's see, we added list 1 and 2 times. Let's see what it will give us. So let me save it and run it. So you can see the repetition. So there's A and there's A. So I just basically added list 1 to itself, as in list 1 plus list 1. You can see what it came out to be. Now I want to do list 1 times 3 or times 4. So you will see this is where we're talking about repetition. You would repeat the same items 4 times. If I save it and run it, you can see the list is formed. So that list 1 now is multiplied 4 times. That. So this is how string works too. But string is not list. They are similar, but they're not the same. They are sharing properties, but they're not the same. Okay. So we've talked about it being an iterable. And that simply means we can take items one by one, A, B, and C. So I can, as an iterable, I can do the for loop on it, say for items in, just like the other example we gave, we can do for item in L1. Remember that L1 is this, right? So I can say for items in L1, print item. Okay. So for item in L1, print item. This will work and basically just print all the items A, then print B, then print C. You can even change it to be apple, banana, and what? Cake. Let's just call it cake. So there are 3 items. You can print them this way. Because it's an iterable, you can iterate over them. You can loop over them using like the for loop. And also because it's an iterable, you can use the in operator like we did before. You can say, we did this for like string. You can say something like if item in list 1, then maybe you do something. right? If item in list 1, then you can print. Do something. Okay? If the item is there, you're just checking if an item is there. And that reminds me, somebody shared a code in the WhatsApp, and there was a line I was trying to correct him. I noticed he didn't get it. He said, how many of you saw that code? That's Peter.
Yes, you repeated it again.
Yes.
I saw it.
Fitres.
He repeated something like that. He was saying something like, if class in Python, right? So he defined
Yes.
class. Let me just call it CL, for example. Let's say CL is equal to CSS. So he then put a line of code like this. If CL in Python, and I was trying to tell him that no, don't do it like this. It should be like this. Because what you're trying to check in that instance, the user supplies to you his class, and you're trying to check if his class is Python. Now, when you do it like this, if you do it like this here in Python, it will check if CL is one of these letters in Python, right?
Yes.
Of which the person has
Okay.
put CSS. It can't be a letter in Python, so definitely it will not be true. Except he put P, then this will be true. Yeah. So the same vein, you could have a list in this that's what we're just talking about. When I put list 1 here, it's almost the same thing. You can do it with string, you can do it with list. So again, now if he wanted to do this and he did